A police officer and at least 2 civilians were killed during protests in the city of Goma in the eastern Congo today over a worsening security situation. Scores of protesters and police were also injured during the clashes. The protesters are calling for an end to the worsening security situation there, and what they believe is the imminent arrival of security forces from neighboring Rwanda to quell unrest. The government denies Rwandan forces are coming to help.
Many in Goma are fed up with a surge in attacks by various armed groups in North Kivu and Ituri provinces that has led authorities to declare a state of siege, despite the presence of the army and a United Nations peacekeeping mission. He says our countrymen who called for a city shutdown attacked the police officers. I know a police superintendent who was killed. His body is in the morgue. He was shot dead at his service post in Rokoko at Nyarangoko police station. His body is at the morgue.
We are angry because our army is supposed to be the 10th best in Africa. But we learn that it has just asked for help. How come? Moreover, it asked an enemy country for help. Are we making friends with our enemy?
Congo has also launched a joint military operation with Uganda, under which at least 1,700 Ugandan troops have crossed into eastern Congo in recent weeks to battle the Allied Democratic Forces.
The people of Goma agreed to express their discontent, which is to say yes to peace and yes to the departure of the Blue Helmets. They say today, we accept that we are not going to work. Although we might have some small financial troubles, we are making the sacrifice.
Recent violence in Goma itself has stoked frustration. Protesters erected makeshift barricades, attacked security posts, and stole weapons.
The people of Congo agreed to spill their own blood. Lumumba was ready to be killed as long as the Belgians left. Today, we will assure you, rain or shine, that this will stop.
Well, for more on this story, we're now joined by African Affairs analyst and Channel Africa producer, Nixon Katembo. Mon frère, bonsoir, bienvenue. Comment ça va aujourd'hui?
Bonsoir Peter et bonsoir à tous nos auditeurs et tout le monde dans ce programme.
Good. Always good to talk to you, my brother. So, I don't know if you saw that clip, but it does sound like quite defiant voices from people on the ground. Is Rwanda considered an enemy by people in that part of the country?
Well, I think judging from the history of the conflict in Eastern DRC since 1996, it is quite clear that the Congolese people see Rwanda as enemy number one, apart from other rebel militias that have propped up in the course of the conflict since 1994. In Eastern DRC. So it is not surprising that people are behaving in a way that they behave today in protesting against what they call the imminent deployment of the Rwandan police and some Rwandan forces in Eastern DRC. But to give context to this, I think it happens after the chief of police in the DRC went to Rwanda a few weeks ago and signed a memorandum of agreement between the Rwandan National Police and the DRC National Police to have a common ground on fighting terrorism, quote unquote, in the Eastern DRC, but also that have it in context where almost 14 countries in the SADC region and Central Africa agreed on forming a joint operation on counterterrorism and having agreed that the headquarters should be based in Goma in Eastern DRC. However, those discussions first happened in Kinshasa, and then they went to Nairobi to discuss the finer details, and they agreed that the secretariat should be based in Goma. And this is, I think, the problem that now is emerging, people resisting on what is happening in there. But of course, there are many other layers to this, especially with the arrival of the Ugandan forces who were deployed to counter or fight the ADF after attacks on the Ugandan soil, when we saw bombs exploding in Kampala in areas of Masaka, and killing people indiscriminately, therefore necessitating Uganda's reaction to go to the forest of the DRC, saying that they are going to fight ADF there.
The involvement of neighboring states has been a long-standing issue in the DRC. I mean, I go back to the first Congo War, or the first that carried on into the second, and many countries were involved, taking sides. Is this a legacy of that we're seeing at the moment with Uganda and Rwanda?
Well, it's not only a legacy, Peter. This is a continuation of tussles between those regional countries that I have just mentioned. You would recall that Rwanda and Uganda have a sour relation at the moment. There are counter-accusations on both sides. Rwanda saying that Uganda is arming East, while opposition, Rwanda National Congress, to evade, in the words of regime in Kigali, the Rwandan territory from Uganda. On the other hand, you have Uganda also saying that Rwanda is also preparing itself to destabilize the regime in Kampala. While further south of Rwanda, you have Burundi also accusing Rwanda of trying to arm the Red Tabara, who are based in the Eastern DRC, to attack the government in Bujumbura. So those are dynamics that are likely to play out in a current situation after the Uganda's entry to fight alongside the FRDC after Kinshasa signed an agreement with Kampala. But I think that in my reading of the situation, that deployment of the Ugandan forces kind of sent a jittery within the Kigali forces and regime, who are well aware of what is happening in Uganda. And of course, if you look at the list of army officers who have left Rwanda, or either have been demoted or have fallen out of favor with the regime in Kigali, and who seem to be, and they are perceived to be close to the Ugandan regime, that tells much about what is happening. And many have said that this is going perhaps to trigger an arms race between those regional countries, especially with Rwanda having purchased the Sky Air Dragon surface-to-air defense missile from China to counter any air or security threats on its territory. You have, on the other hand, Uganda, which purchased Sukhoi fighter jets to give it superiority, air superiority in the region from Russia. So there are many dynamics to what is currently happening in Eastern DRC. But on the other hand, you have Uganda having lost the markets in Rwanda after the closure of Gatuna and all other land borders between Rwanda. It is trying also to create a market in Eastern DRC. Hence, you hear the construction of roads by the Ugandan government in eastern DRC, namely in the Ituri province and in the North Kivu province, while on the other hand, you also have the East African Council Minister agreeing to the DRC joining the East African community. So you have all these multiple layers of the diplomatic nature and the regional political dynamics, coupled with the supremacy battle between regional countries such as Rwanda and Uganda, but also Rwanda being accused, on the other hand, by its neighbors of trying to destabilize the other countries. And of course, this has been the mainstay of many UN reports fingering Rwanda of having a hand in creating many of the over 120 militia groups which are finding themselves in the Eastern DRC. Of course, ADF being one of them, the fact is that if the fight against the ADF is being used as a caveat actually to further regional interest in that particular context of which I've just highlighted, if you want to look at the broader picture of what is playing out in the Eastern DRC.
Well, Kigali denies all of this, of course, but let's talk about what's at the heart of these protests. What are the people most upset about? What are they protesting against?
Well, the people are very upset about Rwanda's involvement in Eastern DRC. They have bad memories of Rwanda's forces. I mean, I was about 11 years to 12 years old when I first witnessed Rwanda's arrival in Eastern DRC. Some of us who come from the Great Lakes region understand their actions and the way they behave. Some of which have committed many atrocities against the people of the DRC, but unfortunately which have gone unpunished, neither talked about in the UN, although there have been a call from the likes of the Nobel laureate Dr. Denis Mukwege to establish the International Special Tribunal for the Congo to try those atrocities. And UN reports are coming out fingering Rwanda and Uganda and many other Congolese officers who were supported by Rwandan government in different rebellions and who are now part of the Congolese army in a subsequent conflict that have happened since 1996. And this is the context in which the Congolese citizens see Rwanda as an enemy number one, bearing the memories and the atrocities that have underwent throughout the course of the conflict.
All right, but I mean, is it fair to say that Uganda and Rwanda alone are responsible for the insecurity in the region? There must be many other players, and that these protesters are concerned about security in general.
Well, they are concerned about security in general, but they are, as I said earlier, there are many other layers. Of course, you look at the mineral resources with the multinational corporations getting a hand on those mineral resources, but also the only way to get those mineral resources to create instability. And as I said, there are over 120 militia groups, some of which are national in nature, trying to combat the government of the DRC, some of which are created just to guarantee the outflow of minerals from the country and mainly going via Rwanda and Uganda. And this is a reason why Rwanda and Uganda have been fingered in the conflict in a manner that which they are named. But on the other hand, also, if you look at the origin of the conflict, those are the two countries that were used by superpowers such as the United States, which supported Rwanda and Uganda in evading the DRC in 1996 and get rid of Mobutu. And once they didn't agree with Kabila's policy, whom they brought to power in Kinshasa, they have to devise a plan to kill him. And intelligence informations that have gathered over the years suggest that Kabila Laurent the Senior was even killed by some Rwandan special forces who used some of their Congolese allies, which were their protege at the time in the inner circle of Kabila, to execute the killing against him on the orders of the American CIA. And you would recall that when he was killed, the ambassador of the United States at the time, he said, and I quote, "The job is done." So that tells you how much of the complexity of the conflict in the DRC, but also the regional political context in which this conflict is being perpetrated.
All right, and that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Always great talking to you. C'est un plaisir tout le temps de te parler.
Thank you, Peter, and it's always a pleasure talking to you and to your viewers. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Au revoir.